Yes. Okay.
And I think we're live.
It's that way.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning from Colorado, Denver, Colorado. We have Robin Miller and Hilary Blair of Articulate, Real and Clear, and Teresa Agresta.
Good morning.
And myself are here in New York today. We have taken a little hiatus from LinkedIn Lives and Thursdays with Culture Talk. I think the last one we did was in January. And one of the things we did while we were in the closet is we actually launched a new website. Anyone that's done that, which has been too celebratory, rah, rah. Anyone who's been involved in a web project knows that those are huge initiatives. And so we're really excited to be back here in March with a Thursdays with Culture Talk and a new website to boot, which you can check out at culturetalk.com. If you're new to the conversation, Culture Talk, we're in the business of making culture tangible. And when we think about culture, we think about, all of the multi-dimensional things that come together to create culture, including who we are as individuals, as leaders, how we show up, how teams gel and come together and get things done. And then all of us all together as an organization, what is that? How do we make that a tangible thing we can talk about? And we're always excited to bring our friends from Articulate, Real and Clear. They are certified to use Culture Talk with their clients. And we are learning so much from the journey that you all have taken clients on. I'll just give a very brief introduction in that Articulate is a communications coaching firm. And they do a lot of work with teams. And that's really what we want to talk about today is what are they learning, discovering, what's working about the work they do with teams. And the common thread through their coaching practice is that everyone on their team actually comes from a performance background. So in the performing arts, the art in Articulate. And so without further ado, I'd love to have Hilary and Robin tell us about Articulate. Just give us sort of what you're working on and who you're working with.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We currently are working with executive leadership teams on their communication and understanding and building self-awareness. We're working with IT teams, consulting firms, working with venture capitalists, working with sales teams across the board and internationally. So that's the type of teams that we're working with. And when you think about teams, you have to think about teams that go externally and teams that remain internally. So we have focused on teams that are working closely together. And we have also focused on teams that come across, they're cross-functional and maybe in different places in the world coming together to work on their communication. So that gives a little bit of the types of teams that we do work with as coaches.
Using the archetypes.
Yes,
in particular.
and using the archetypes.
That's where we're like, oh yeah, that's
it begins with the archetypes because it begins with our story.
Yeah.
Well, and I know you do improv because when we were talking last week, you were talking about improv and archetypes. So let me just put that out there and tell us what not everyone likes our improv.
Right. That is a great launch point for this. So I, having been in the training industry through many iterations for decades and being a performer and a drama teacher, improv has been part of everything that I do. For the last few years, I would say, or maybe the last 8, whatever, I have had it sometimes woven in, but disguised that it was improv. So we didn't necessarily let anybody know.
Don't use the word.
Right?
No.
Scary.
And with the way the world works, there's so many things that we're talking about more, and improv is one that we're talking about more, storytelling, talking about more, all of the words that come and flow through. The big distinction that I will make for our work, the first thing is to say that applied improv is using the improv exercises, activities, structures, games, whatever you want to call them, whatever that works for you in your heart and mind. And applied means that we play, we run through the exercise, and then we do the all-important facilitated discussion afterwards. How does that connect? How did you feel about that? How does it connect to what you do? What came up for you? What did you notice in your team? The questions that connect it directly to what's happening, super important. The reason, there are many reasons why improv is hard, and hard for performers as well. The flexibility, the agility, the being present in the moment, we work a lot on presence, are some of the tools that are honed by diving in and using improv and making sure that we're doing the applied improv. One of the things that has made it harder or has scared some business corporate teams is that sometimes people see something and they're like, that's a great exercise. And they pull it out of context or they don't connect it to what's going on. So then you have these floating warm-ups or icebreakers or let's have fun. And it can get irritating, we'll say.
For some archetypes.
Yes, for some archetypes, some patterns may feel a little irritating. How does it connect? What's the feeling behind this? And for me, that it's the classic one of the classic structures from improv is yes and. And yes and has been pulled out of context so much that when I now mention it in some corporate settings, they're like, oh, it doesn't work, it's horrible, I can't yes and everything. And I said, absolutely. And therefore, we are making sure that we nail it down to it's not yes anding and yes, everything's great and we're moving forward, yes anding. It's yes and acknowledging that I hear you. And that acknowledgement is the key thing. And when we pull improv out of context, it can be quite disorienting, irritating, whatever it might be. The archetypes, when we have the assessments, we have found the delightful, to our own delight, that when we are discussing the archetypes and your top three, and when we say, okay, let's do an exercise, whatever it might be, and we're inviting people to look at it through their archetypal patterns. Well, let's have your sage. Let's have everyone have their sages, whether it's one of your top three or because we have all 12 in us. Bring the sage in. Oh, afterwards you go, maybe. So what archetype do you think came up during the playing of that game? Oh, it was my explorer. It was my hero. All of a sudden, we are able to talk about improv. We are able to enter improv, which can be daunting and scary, with the buffer of discussing it through our archetypes so that we aren't feeling like, oh, so Cynthia, when you were in that improv and you're like, or Teresa's like, I was feeling. It gives a language that discusses patterns within us, but not us. And so we have found it's a shortcut to diving in and having really great discussions. It makes it feel safer. I know that's one of those words too that we use quite often, but that idea that improv can be so scary and seems like some people it's easier for others, right? Using the archetypes gives people a language to discuss that. And then we have these rich discussions afterwards, using the language of our archetypal patterns and what we noticed. And yeah, so it's been super exciting and goes there fast. That building that trust faster. And I think that with improv, you often have to build that trust, always have to build trust. In order to do improv, create a space where people feel safer. We're going in, they're bringing a lot of U-Haul baggage about improv. And with the archetypes, which we're using in order to discuss communication patterns, we're finding we can just go right there and they go right with it. And they say the same thing. They go, it's just easier. Not talking about me, but talking about my patterns. So I get super excited about it because it makes me feel that it's going to be a lot easier to bring in the power of improv with the tool of the archetypes and have real change and to be able to drop into real discussions much more quickly and more easily.
That's awesome. Are you finding, I'm curious, that by having the archetypes, it gives participants a starting point?
Yes.
Like if I know nothing about improv, or if I perceive myself as someone who's not good at that or not comfortable with that all of a sudden I have a starting place, like a doorway to come in.
and I can talk about it without talking about me. It's like this little,
Yeah.
we're talking about communication and
Yeah.
we're talking about improv. Who's going to feel great about that? Oh, and
Yeah,
we're talking
me, right? Sign me up, right?
The other thing I find that it's doing, Teresa and Cynthia, is that it's disarming assumptions that people have brought to teams. And we watch people in their patterns and we make assumptions and we build story, and oftentimes drama happens. And it's really disarming all of that when we become self-aware of our own patterns, and then our team's like, oh yeah, that's a strength for so-and-so, or that's a strength for so-and-so. Now, how do I actually interact with that energy?
Yes.
Right. It changes. It has to change the lens. If you're being honest with yourself, it has to change the lens by which you see your colleagues.
Yeah. And Robin, we had we were doing it, using them in different places. And towards the end of one, in a really fabulous, like first team, they were practicing being first team because they all have big teams that they manage, right? So first team, and they went off into breakouts and they said, using your archetypes, create the perfect missing like if you could create the character, the superhero who's going to be perfect for your team. And so they went off and they came back. And what was fascinating about these two different teams, and they created superheroes, none of the archetypes overlapped, and they called on the things that they didn't have within their own team members, and they named them. It was so fun. And then we could talk about what's missing. Why does this superhero have that quality? What's working? And why did you two, as two different teams, choose completely different characters?
That are missing.
It gave really solid tools to talk about what's needed. And yeah, it was super fun.
And some insight. And I've met with that team since then, this past week, and they're trying to practice in their meetings. How do we bring the gesture forward? How do we actually interact? How do we create fun? Because we're really serious and we want to have some lightness. And so they're being intentional about trying to bring archetypes into their meetings.
Wow.
And it sounds like they have adopted the language.
Yes.
Which is such a great tool. If you have an actual ability to understand each other just with a word or a phrase.
Yeah, Teresa, it's so much easier for me, who Sage is not one of my top, right? I have it in there. It's not one of my top. It's much easier for me to say, oh, Robin has Sage and her other people have Sage, that the Sage in them needs numbers and research. It's easier for me to realize, instead of saying, oh, Robin needs numbers and research, that has a different energy than her Sage needs that. I understand that I need to pull my Sage forward in order to bring that. And we're finding other teams that language, again, creates that space, that it's a pattern that's needed, not a personal attack.
There was a leader that I was talking with a couple of weeks ago, and they were very frustrated because they gave a project to one of their team leads and they weren't getting the results that they anticipated. And so as we started talking, I really dug into what are your archetypes, because she had taken the assessment and realized that she was expecting someone who does not have high Sage, since we're talking about Sage, high Sage to do the thing that she would do naturally. And her frustration was, the shadow side was showing up because why can't they get it? And I've heard other people say, why can't my team just do it? That's not their giftedness. Those aren't their patterns.
I read a great article this morning in Strategy and Business. It's a PwC publication that was talking about why is teaming so hard, and sort of those unwrittenness, that you have to be intentional as a leader. If you want a great team, you have to own creating the dynamic, right? Otherwise, we do as team members kind of walk around, thinking people should think and do things the way that we approach them, like our limited lens, which of course we can understand through archetype. But how do, I love that you guys are offering, I think you're starting like all of your team engagements with an assessment. Let's learn our archetypes and let's use that as a foundation so that these other things can come up and come out and be tools.
And Teaming, most of us have teamed since we were little, right? We are part of teams and groups like all the way through. And two things came to mind with that. One is that reminder from having taught all ages that one member of a class absent, one member of a team present can shift the whole dynamic. And it's easier to remember from, I'm coming into class, like, why is the dynamic? Oh, so-and-so's not here today. Right, so coming in. And that energy, remembering that that's part of our business and corporate world as well. The thing that I think is we've lost is that, and that's what we're bringing, is having group discussions. We've lost discussing things as a group and a team. We've started saying there's good and bad feedback, and there's negative and positive feedback. And anything that's negative, we don't want to shame anyone or put them, so we do it quietly. We do it in a silo. So now all of a sudden, we're not really teaming around the things that can help us grow and move forward. We're separating it out for your 360 or your quarterly meeting or whatever. You get it privately. But prior to this, whether you're on a sporting team, a choir, whatever it is, and if you hear, we don't think of it as negative and positive feedback. It's all constructive. What we're practicing using the archetypes with communication is, where are you coming from? Which pattern can you see it as being constructive? And if we're talking about patterns with a team, we don't have to go off and do it privately. We can be together where there's so much more trust built. I do think that, and this is a slight tangent, but that idea of being able to use the archetypes as tools to have communication, I think empowers everyone. Because why I think teams, choirs, early, whatever, however, we were on a team when we were younger and everybody was like, of course, we don't give each soccer player their feedback individually. We don't give each.
Come on over there.
Just the visual, right, of that.
And it's not negative. It's like, you got to come in like an actor. It's not negative to be told you have to come in sooner. That's what has to happen, right? And you're not quite nailing it. We see it as a team. I think we are trying to empower all managers, all people who lead people, to give feedback. A coach, a choir director, they have learned very specifically how to give feedback to their group to make it work. That's why they're good at coaching and directing and all of that.
To get what they want out of the whole group.
Yeah, and they know, oh, I probably need to in a group do it this way. Now we bring that feedback to the corporate or business setting, and we're having anyone who is managing anyone have to give feedback. And though we've been teaching it, I think what we've done is we've said, it's kind of hard, so let's isolate you. So I think that in the nervousness, we've said it's about not wanting to shame the individual by giving feedback. I think, this is me, this is not scientifically proven. I would love you to research this. I think that we have taken the person who's given it, we feel more comfortable. If we are not skilled at feedback, we feel more comfortable giving it privately. It's really a different skill to give feedback in a group.
Yeah.
What we're able to do with the archetypes is practice that in a team, because we have that buffer. I'm seeing that I'm coming from my magician, I'm seeing that you're an explorer. That ability to talk about feedback empowers almost anyone who's needing to give feedback to a team.
That's a great word too, empowering, because even when you said that, I just felt the openness of, now it allows that explorer to say, yes, you're right, and here's how I see it. So all of a sudden, instead of being shut down, that person has been invited to open up. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And say what their experience is, because we sometimes talk about archetype, it's like a non-judgmental, it's just a pattern, right? And sometimes, on a team, the strengths of our pattern might be triggering to another archetype.
That has been her huge discovery. So I was having a session yesterday, and I started realizing it's not about strength and shadow. Like when I'm in my shadow, that's the only time I'm irritating to someone, right? Irritating to myself and irritating to someone else. I started watching people and realizing that when you're in your strength of something, that also could be irritating to someone, because you're stepping out, you're being the hero, you're making fun in the room, you're the jester, and that can be irritating. So yesterday when I was coaching a client, I said, have you ever thought about your strength of being innocent could cause people to feel less at ease, or that you're not taking their anxiety or their worry seriously, or that you're not hearing them. And the individual said, I'd never thought about that. I said, that beautiful part of your innocence that's strong in these moments needs to shift to a place of wisdom and experience, and share your experience of when you also felt like that, so that your optimism doesn't seem ungrounded, Pollyanna.
Yeah.
You're not really hearing your team or your teammates, and a light bulb went off.
And what a nice way to share that feedback as well, right? To shift the experience for the person receiving the feedback, to get them to see it. Because it sounds like a very well-intentioned leader.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think what you're saying too, just about understanding the buffer and the patterns, it's not you, Cynthia, who have failed us, and you that need to be, taken to another place to get that feedback. It's you being you, and there are strengths to that pattern, and also you can start to see, I know, because we've used it a lot on our own team, like we start to have these little shorthand ways of communicating to each other. Ooh, I know I'm stuck right now, but it's my sage that needs something. Or I know I'm delaying delivering this project, but it's my creator that can't let go of it, right? And it becomes less about finger pointing and blame, and more about like the ability to see ourselves as whole people, right? That bring a lot to the party. I know we were talking as well about, you were referencing Brown's work and the rumble. And how archetypes can be so practical from that standpoint. Tell us more.
My sage and my hero, I'm high hero with sage second. And if a team understands that, not just my team, but teams in the past, if teams understand that those two combinations, when it's something that I'm passionate about, I can get very intense. And when teams understand that about me, then that my hope is that they realize it is not about them. It's about my own passion. So no longer in a team meeting does it have to be Robin's upset at me, or Robin's this, or Robin's that. It's, oh, Robin has high hero and she has sage, and now she's impassioned about something. So what is it how can I get curious about that? Rather than on teams in the past, I've been told to just shut up, or you're too intense, or or XYZ. So that rumble, how can you be in rumble with me when I'm passionate about something, realizing it's me trying to figure and lead my way through something?
Wow.
And absolutely. And I've seen that. So that element is, and how I deal with how my magician and my caregiver, taking care of other people, deal with the different energies. And I think Brene Brown, with her sense of the rumble, and I thought I'm like, that is awesome. The rumble, we get in and we talk about things. I'm like, yeah, right. And that's such the theater person in me, right? That's what you do in rehearsals. What do you think? I don't know. That's our idea. What's your idea? And we have this idea. So it's taking that rumble and putting it into the workplace. I think though, that I have a hair, sorry. There's a hair there. I think that when you're rumbling in a play or discussing a scene, you have a context. So it kept it safer because we were discussing characters and what's the theme and where's it going. When we bring the rumble to the business environment, unless you have Brene's team, no, I think she's probably great at it, right? Her team's all ready for it. I think that it can be unnerving because that sense of emotion is not as comfortable nor safe for people in the corporate. So many articles about how do you show up as a leader and not have that emotion. And it's not having that emotion, it's not going to that drama. So it's self-aware enough to know what's going on. What I have been exploring with people is that the archetypes, the patterns, allow us to rumble. So we're taking what you just talked about and we were discussing with feedback and teams. it's translating that now to where we have to talk about something. And it's easier for Robin to say, I know it's my sage and my hero are passionate versus I am as, who I am, the leader in the group or whatever. It's easier for all of us in the space to go, oh, it's her hero versus it's Robin. I'm just, because you said that out. I'm practicing that with other teams, is how do you talk to each other around the more heated areas, right? And not all emotions run the gamut. We seem to talk about people being emotional as being upset, frustrated, angry versus elated, but that is also an elevated emotion. So that sense of those ones that are trickier for people to receive, right? That sense of attaching archetypal patterns to them, both for the person claiming them and for the people receiving them, allows the rumble that Brene Brown talks about, I feel, to be easier to access without it feeling so, wow, let's bring it in and rumble it out. Let's figure out what we think about things and have emotions and all that, which I'm like, yes. And it can really roll out of control or be really hard for people. And if we allow that buffer of archetypes, it's allowing a more intense, a deeper and less contained conversation because we have the archetypes to help hold it.
Yeah. And it feels like less pieces to pick up later.
Yeah.
So where if we were normally rumbling, we might say, okay, it's going to get a little rough. We'll pick up the pieces. It's important to acknowledge. But I think with that kind of rumble with the archetypes, it's like there are fewer pieces because we're kind of cleaning up as we go along.
Yeah. When you think about, a lot of us we pay a lot of money in our lives to go away to retreats that put us in those situations. And we're able to learn about ourselves and to hang in there and to get to know people deeper. And we're even if we're not aware of it, we're dealing with our archetypal patterns in those situations. And it really forces us to team and we come out on the other side going, wow, that was such an awesome experience. What if we could live in that every day? That was an awesome experience. It got rough. It was, we had to learn to do a win-win. And I got to learn more about your patterns and you got to learn more about mine. And we found a way through.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh my God. It's so beautiful. We found a way through.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Teresa.
I was just going to observe, so we found a way through this, right? But then the beauty of it is there'll be another thing. There's always another thing. And so the huge developmental opportunities, there's so many different directions you can take. So you can learn to come from a higher level of development or your own strengths. You can learn to, when you're in shadow, or how to communicate better with someone else, or to the point of your innocent leader, like how to shift and understand how you're being perceived and how your communication is landing. Just kind of feels like, endless ways to continue to get benefit from the work and to go deeper.
And there's a lot of self-reflection too. So for me to recognize that magician ruler for me, and those two have, they can be at odds, right? One is like, what's out there? And the other one's, I need structure. And I have started to have conversations. I've always had conversations with myself. I'm having more conversations with myself to recognize that I need to come to terms with how those play together before I even share it with anyone else. Recognizing that it can be overwhelming for my team. If my visionary is going like this, and let's get all of the processes in place and the rules to make it happen, you're like,
what did you say?
So it's like, what? And recognizing that those two together, I've been used to them playing together. They can be daunting as a leader for my team to hear that if I'm not aware of where I'm coming from. So for me to recognize who's speaking at what time and what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of any framework, but story is such a simple framework. It's so human. And I think that, we know our brains are wired for it. There's new studies that even say our hearts start to beat in unison when we are connected in the same story. So I just think it's we have been, I know we said earlier in January, this is the year of human-centric cultures. That's what LinkedIn has put out there, after coming through a pandemic, all the things that are going on in the world, people want to feel connected.
Yeah.
And we know that, learning to be vulnerable, to have some buffer and safety, to be myself really creates those opportunities for trust. And I'll be really curious, as you keep going with these teams, because there's kind of like, I always find with archetypes, there's like what happened, like, ooh, I had a realization about myself, or I saw my patterns at play in the moment. But then as time goes by, it's so fun to watch how teams start to talk and use the language of archetypes to navigate.
Yes.
Yeah, and problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
The strengths of someone else. If I bring you over as a
Right.
gesture, what will I learn and what will open up for me?
Yeah.
To
Yeah, it's
problem
like we
solve
give
something.
that curiosity too. We like
Yeah.
give people room
Yeah.
to, be who they are and get curious about what is it that they need. Because all these patterns are driven by like some underlying need. To Robin's point earlier, like she gets passionate about something and then her sage and hero really kick in. So awesome conversation.
So, Articulate, tell our audience how they can connect with you. I know you've got some info on the screen there, some phone number, but who do you want to hear from? Who should reach out? What kinds of clients, and how can they find you?
Mm-hmm. Well, our information first, that's obvious, right?
Yeah.
We're interested in teams that truly want to make the investment. So while we go in and we do one-offs on training, we're really about how can we help support you, coach, lead in our programs to make significant shifts. So if you have a team that's having communication difficulty, you have a team that wants to learn about communication, those international groups, and bring those silos together. If you have leaders that really want to go deeper so that they can make a significant impact, not only on their first team, but with the leaders that they're leading and have it trickle down, you want to make culture shifts. We want to be part of that. You have pain points around those things. We're the team that can support you through that.
Very nice.
The culture word, I wanted is there. It's called CultureTalk. I think we're a fun combo. So communication creates culture. So that talk, that element of it.
Yeah.
And the piece that we have found we resonate with is people who believe in deepening the individual so the team can rise. So we work on the individual communication so the team can rise to what we know the potential is there. And it's super exciting. It's not formulaic. That's why the archetypes are so exciting.
Yeah.
They heighten those individual patterns, essences, energies, and then the team takes off.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you are, anyone out there is also interested in how to apply this work, how to take, the journey that Articulate and their team has been on, and they have a number of 3 people on their team that are certified and a whole team that's bringing this to life, we would love to invite you to join us. Cynthia and I will be running our next certification classes, which run for 8 consecutive weeks on Zoom. Just 2 hours a week. So I don't want to make it sound like that's 8 full weeks of classes, but it's a great opportunity to learn how to apply the archetypes, whether it's for teaming and working with individuals the way that Articulate does, or whether you're interested in understanding how to apply archetypes to organizational culture. And as Cynthia started us off with, talking about how to make culture tangible and how to turn it into a business tool that can really drive, important change and strategic initiatives. So the next class is going to be 2 cohorts kicking off on April 5th. That's a Tuesday. We'll be teaching class at 10 a.m. New York and one at 5 p.m. New York. So 2 chances to join. We do have people from all over the world, and we'd love for you to be one of them. So
I'm going to plug the fact that the community, the CultureTalk community, is incredible, inspiring and supportive, and the bonus I didn't expect from doing it. It's amazing.
That's awesome. Yep, you get to hang out with cool people like Robin and Hilary.
CultureTalk.com is the same URL, but the new
A new website.
Yes.
And you can hit getcertified.culturetalk.com to learn more about certification. Thank you both. Articulate, always a pleasure to see you and have you with us.
Yeah, wonderful to be with you both.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day.
Lots of thoughts already sparked and going now. All right, so thank you.
Bye.